Chapter 6 Mina Murray's Journal 24 July. Whitby. Lucy met me at the station, looking sweeter and lovelier than ever, and we drove up to the house at the Crescent in which they have rooms. This is a lovely place. The little river, the Esk, runs through a deep valley, which broadens out as it comes near the harbor. A great viaduct runs across, with high piers, through which the view seems somehow further away than it really is. The valley is beautifully green, and it is so steep that when you are on the high land on either side you look right across it, unless you are near enough to see down. The houses of the old town, the side away from us, are all red-roofed, and seem piled up one over the other anyhow, like the pictures we see of Nuremberg. Right over the town is the ruin of Whitby Abbey, which was sacked by the Danes, and which is the scene of part of Marmion, where the girl was built up in the wall. It is a most noble ruin, of immense size, and full of beautiful and romantic bits. There is a legend that a white lady is seen in one of the windows. Between it and the town there is another church, the parish one, round which is a big graveyard, all full of tombstones. This is to my mind the nicest spot in Whitby, for it lies right over the town, and has a full view of the harbor and all up the bay to where the headland called Kettleness stretches out into the sea. It descends so steeply over the harbor that part of the bank has fallen away, and some of the graves have been destroyed. In one place part of the stonework of the grave stretches out over the sandy pathway far below. There are walks, with seats beside them, through the churchyard, and people go and sit there all day long looking at the beautiful view and enjoying the breeze. I shall come and sit here very often myself and work. Indeed, I am writing now, with my book on my knee, and listening to the talk of 3 old men who are sitting beside me. They seem to do nothing all day but sit up here and talk. The harbor lies below me, with, on the far side, one long granite wall stretching out into the sea, with a curve outwards at the end of it, in the middle of which is a lighthouse. A heavy seawall runs along outside of it. On the near side, the seawall makes an elbow crooked inversely, and its end too has a lighthouse. Between the 2 piers there is a narrow opening into the harbor, which then suddenly widens. It is nice at high water, but when the tide is out it shoals away to nothing, and there is merely the stream of the Esk, running between banks of sand, with rocks here and there. Outside the harbor on this side there rises for about half a mile a great reef, the sharp edge of which runs straight out from behind the south lighthouse. At the end of it is a buoy with a bell, which swings in bad weather, and sends in a mournful sound on the wind. They have a legend here that when a ship is lost bells are heard out at sea. I must ask the old man about this. He is coming this way. ... He is a funny old man. He must be awfully old, for his face is all gnarled and twisted like the bark of a tree. He tells me that he is nearly 100, and that he was a sailor in the Greenland fishing fleet when Waterloo was fought. He is, I am afraid, a very skeptical person, for when I asked him about the bells at sea and the white lady at the Abbey he said very brusquely, "I wouldn't fash mazel about them, miss. Them things be all wore out. Mind, I don't say that they never was, but I do say that they wasn't in my time. They be all very well for cummers and trippers, and the like, but not for a nice young lady like you. Them feet folks from York and Leeds that be always eatin' cured herrins and drinkin' tea and lookin' out to buy cheap jet would creed aught. I wonder mazel who'd be bothered tellin' lies to them, even the newspapers, which is full of fool talk." I thought he would be a good person to learn interesting things from, so I asked him if he would mind telling me something about the whale fishing in the old days. He was just settling himself to begin when the clock struck 6, whereupon he labored to get up, and said, "I must gang anwards home now, miss. My granddaughter doesn't like to be kept waitin' when the tea is ready, for it takes me time to crammel aboon the grease, for there be a many of 'em, and, miss, I lack belly timber sarely by the clock." He hobbled away, and I could see him hurrying, as well as he could, down the steps. The steps are a great feature on the place. They lead from the town up to the church. There are hundreds of them, I do not know how many, and they wind up in a delicate curve. The slope is so gentle that a horse could easily walk up and down them. I think they must originally have had something to do with the Abbey. I shall go home too. Lucy went out visiting with her mother, and as they were only duty calls, I did not go. They will be home by this 1st of August. I came up here an hour ago with Lucy, and we had a most interesting talk with my old friend and the 2 others who always come and join him. He is evidently the Sir Oracle of them, and I should think must have been in his time a most dictatorial person. He will not admit anything, and downfaces everybody. If he can't out-argue them he bullies them, and then takes their silence for agreement with his views. Lucy was looking sweetly pretty in her white lawn frock. She has got a beautiful color since she has been here. I noticed that the old men did not lose any time in coming up and sitting near her when we sat down. She is so sweet with old people. I think they all fell in love with her on the spot. Even my old man succumbed and did not contradict her, but gave me double share instead. I got him on the subject of the legends, and he went off at once into a sort of sermon. I must try to remember it and put it down. It be all fool talk, lock, stock, and barrel, that's what it be, and nowt else. These bands and wafts and bow ghosts and bar guests and bogles and all anent them is only fit to set bairns and dizzy women abe elderin. they be nowt but air blebs. They, and all grims and signs and warnin's, be all invented by parsons and ilsome buke bodies and railway touters to scare and scunner halflins, and to get folks to do something that they don't other incline to. It makes me ireful to think of them. Why, it's them that, not content with printin' lies on paper and preachin' them out of pulpits, does want to be cuttin' them on the tombstones. Look here all around you in what airt ye will, all them stains, holdin' up their heads as well as they can out of their pride, is a cant, simply tumblin' down with the weight of the lies wrote on them. Here lies the body or sacred to the memory wrote on all of them. And yet in nigh half of them there bean't no bodies at all, and the memories of them bean't cared a pinch of snuff about, much less sacred. Lies all of them, nothin' but lies of one kind or another. My gog, but it'll be a quare scouterman at the day of judgment when they come tumblin' up in their death sarks, all juped together and tryin' to drag their tombstones with them to prove how good they was, some of them trimlin' and ditherin', with their hands that dozin' and slippy from lyin' in the sea that they can't even keep their group of them. I could see from the old fellow's self-satisfied air and the way in which he looked round for the approval of his cronies that he was showing off, so I put in a word to keep him going. "Oh, Mr. Swales, you can't be serious. Surely these tombstones are not all wrong? Yablins, there may be a poorish few not wrong, savin' where they make out the people too good, for there be folk that do think a bomb bowl be like the sea, if only it be their own, the whole thing be only lies. Now look you here, you come here a stranger, and you see this Kirkgarth." I nodded, for I thought it better to assent, though I did not quite understand his dialect. I knew it had something to do with the church. He went on, "And you can say that all these stains be aboon folk that be happed here, snot and snog?" I assented again. "Then that be just where the lie comes in. Why, there be scores of these lay beds that be tomb as old Dunn's back a box on Friday night." He nudged one of his companions, and they all laughed. And my gog, how could they be otherwise? "Look at that one, the aftest abaft the beer bank. Read it." I went over and read, "Edward Spenslaw, Master Mariner, murdered by pirates off the coast of Andres, April, 1854, et. 30. When I came back Mr. Swales went on, who brought him home, I wonder, to hap him here, murdered off the coast of Andres. And you constated his body lay under. Why, I could name ye a dozen whose bones lie in the Greenland seas above." He pointed northwards, "or where the currents may have drifted them. There be the stains around ye. Ye can, with your young eyes, read the small print of the lies from here. This Braithwaite Lowry, I knew his father, lost in the lively off Greenland in 20, or Andrew Woodhouse, drowned in the same seas in 1777, or John Paxton, drowned off Cape Farewell a year later, or old John Rawlings, whose grandfather sailed with me, drowned in the Gulf of Finland in 50. Do ye think that all these men will have to make a rush to Whitby when the trumpet sounds? I have me antherums aboot it. I tell ye that when they got here they'd be jomlin' and jostlin' one another that way that it 'ould be like a fight up on the ice in the old days, when we'd be at one another from daylight to dark, and trying to tie up our cuts by the light of the aurora borealis." This was evidently local pleasantry, for the old man cackled over it, and his cronies joined in with gusto. "But," I said, "surely you are not quite correct, for you start on the assumption that all the poor people, or their spirits, will have to take their tombstones with them on the day of judgment. Do you think that will be really necessary?" "Well, what else be they tombstones for? Answer me that, miss." "To please their relatives, I suppose." "To please their relatives, you suppose?" This he said with intense scorn. "How will it pleasure their relatives to know that lies is wrote over them, and that everybody in the place knows that they be lies?" He pointed to a stone at our feet which had been laid down as a slab, on which the seat was rested, close to the edge of the cliff. "Read the lies on that through Stian," he said. The letters were upside down to me from where I sat, but Lucy was more opposite to them, so she leant over and read. "Sacred to the memory of George Cannon, who died, in the hope of a glorious resurrection, on July 29, 1873, falling from the rocks at Kettleness. This tomb was erected by his sorrowing mother to her dearly beloved son. He was the only son of his mother, and she was a widow." "Really, Mr. Swales, I don't see anything very funny in that." She spoke her comment very gravely and somewhat severely. "Ye don't see aught funny. Ha, ha, but that's because ye don't gom the sorrowin' mother was a hellcat that hated him because he was acrooped. A regular lamiter he was, and he hated her so that he committed suicide in order that she mightn't get an insurance she put on his life. He blew nigh the top of his head off with an old musket that they had for scarin' the crows with. 'Twarn't for crows then, for it brought the clegs and the doups to him. That's the way he fell off the rocks. And, as to hopes of a glorious resurrection, I've often heard him say mazel that he hoped he'd go to hell, for his mother was so pious that she'd be sure to go to heaven, and he didn't want to addle where she